Hey, welcome to Draft Academy. My name is Mike. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to install an external CSS framework and use it inside of your CSS project. So an external CSS framework, also known as like a CSS framework or a front-end framework, is basically a collection of CSS and JavaScript files, which will allow you to style your website a lot easier. So it kind of takes like all the hassle out of writing your CSS. So you can sit there all day and write out a bunch of CSS, or you can download one of these CSS frameworks, and like 90% of the CSS that you're ever going to have to use has already been written for you. And there's tons of awesome documentation on a lot of these websites. So this is what a lot of developers will do, is they'll use frameworks like this, and then if they need to modify or edit certain things, they'll go into the files and edit or modify them. So just because you're using a CSS framework doesn't mean you don't need to know CSS. It always helps to know CSS. But these CSS frameworks will take a lot of the hard, like tedious, useless work out of styling your pages for you. So they're really awesome. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can download one. We're going to be downloading one called Bootstrap. That's sort of like the most popular one for beginners. But really the steps that I give you and the stuff that we talk about is going to be applicable to any of these frameworks. So over here in my web browser, I'm here on this page. It's called getbootstrap.com. And Bootstrap is, basically a CSS framework, and it helps you to build like responsive and mobile first websites. So if you use something like Bootstrap, then your website is guaranteed to look really good on like a big browser screen or on a small mobile screen. And that's one of the cool things about these, is you don't have to go in and like write all the code to make it look really good on all those screen sizes. Something like Bootstrap will just do it for you. And Bootstrap's not the only framework. There's tons of these frameworks out there. But like I said, this seems to be the most popular with new users. So I'm just gonna click download. And generally when you're downloading these CSS frameworks, there's two ways that you can do this. And the first way is you can just download the CSS files from them. So they have like this huge monster CSS file. And also a lot of times they'll have a JavaScript file. So JavaScript is a programming language that's used on the web, and certain elements of your website need JavaScript in order to run and be responsive. So a lot of times you're gonna have to download a CSS file and maybe a JavaScript file. So the first way is to download the files. The second thing we can do though, instead of downloading the files, is we can grab them from what's called a CDN. And a CDN is basically a server that stores all of these files. So a CDN would store the CSS files for Bootstrap, and it would store like the JavaScript files for Bootstrap. And so instead of downloading those files onto our actual computer, whenever we needed them, our web server would just go off to that CDN, grab those files, and then include it inside of our HTML project. So you can do either downloading the files on your own or using a CDN. I've always preferred to use CDNs. So in this tutorial, that's what I'm going to show you how to do. But you can always just download the files and then import them into your project like you normally would. So whenever you're on a page like this, and any of these front-end frameworks are going to have a lot of documentation about getting started, you're generally, like I said, you're going to need a CSS file, and a lot of times you're going to need a JavaScript file. So you can see here that Bootstrap CDN has this all set up for us. So basically all we have to do is just copy this and paste it into our project. So I can copy this CSS link, and there's also this JavaScript script tag. So here's a link, and this is basically just a style sheet, and here's a script, and this is like JavaScript. And you can see here this address is like Max CDN, so this is like a CDN hosting site. And this will store all the files that we need. So we don't actually have to download them now because they're all stored on that CDN. So I can go over now into my CSS file where I want to use these, and I can put them up here in the head. So up here in the head, I'm just going to include both of these. And they're like pretty long file lists, but it's basically, like I said, just grabbing a style sheet and grabbing this JavaScript. And if we look over here on the website, it's also recommending that we get these two things. So this is a language that you're going to hear about a lot, jQuery. jQuery is a JavaScript library, And basically what it does is it allows something like Bootstrap to manipulate the HTML in an even more powerful way. So we can use CSS to change things like the color, and we can do like basic animations, change padding, stuff like that. But Bootstrap could use a language like jQuery to do even more cool things. And so if we want to use any of that functionality, we're going to have to use this jQuery, and there's this other thing called Popper that they're also making us download. So I'm just going to copy these and we'll throw these into our project as well. So this is going to go, we'll actually put these right before these guys. So I can paste these in here. And now I can just save my index.html file, and all of this should hopefully just work as long as you follow the instructions on the website. What's going to happen here is our website is actually going to update. So all of the Bootstrap styling is going to take effect, and our website's going to end up looking a little bit different than it does now. So I'll refresh, and you can see now instead of that font and all the colors that we had before, now it's changed a little bit. So the font looks a little bit different. It's not using like that as harsh of a black color. So it just generally looks different. And this is what that front-end framework is going to do for us. It's going to give us all of this CSS that is already just kind of built in. And generally the way that you would style this is by including specific tags that, like, for example, Bootstrap would have defined. So whenever you go to a website like this, they're always going to have really good documentation, and what you want to look for is different things like, for example, components or layouts. These will tell you how to, for example, like this will tell you how you can build a layout, and it'll walk you through like all of these things. So you can see here we're using a class called container. And basically Bootstrap or any other front-end framework will have a bunch of classes that they defined in that CSS. And we can just access those classes and they'll automatically style all of our elements for us. So you can kind of look through here and, obviously like get whatever code you need to get from in here. We can look at different components. So you can see here, this allows us to use all these different things like breadcrumbs, buttons. Bootstrap has really cool buttons. So your buttons could look, something like this. You can use all these different colors. You can do things like drop downs or forms, and they all look really cool. So you don't have to go through the trouble of styling all these elements. Something like Bootstrap will do it for you. And to be quite honest with you, this is what a lot of like professional developers are going to be using. So they might use something like Bootstrap and maybe they'll be customizing certain aspects of it. But for the most part, like a lot of people have no desire to go in and like write these massive CSS files with all this like custom styling. These front-end frameworks are becoming more and more popular every day because they take so much of the hard work out of styling your websites. And what's cool is you can download the files like I showed you before, and you can just modify them and edit them yourself. So since you have all this CSS knowledge now, you could go into one of those files and you could, play around and tweak different things and customize it to your liking. But I would definitely recommend using a front-end framework like this. Trust me, unless you're really looking to get super personal with CSS, you probably don't want to go through all the trouble of like creating all of these elements yourself. But if you do, power to you. So that's a little bit about front-end frameworks. And again, there's hundreds of these things out there, and most of them are, following the same installation process as we just did. So take your time, look through, a couple different ones. Bootstrap's always good. There's another one I like called Material CSS. So you can really use these to make your layouts and your CSS more powerful. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to Draft Academy to be the first to know when we release new content. Also, we're always looking to improve, so if you have any constructive criticism or questions or anything, leave a comment below. Finally, if you're enjoying Draft Academy and you want to help us grow, head over to draftacademy.com/contribute and invest in our future.